All right, everyone. Thank you for being here for this Faith and Justice Alliance webinar in partnership with Pisgah Legal Services, talking about the driver's license restoration project in Buncombe County. We're excited to be here with you all today on behalf of the North Carolina Faith and Justice Alliance. My name is Jared Smith. I am a staff member of the Equal Access to Justice Commission, which is a program of our state Supreme Court. The Faith and Justice Alliance is one of our programs that allows us to connect faith and legal communities in an effort to connect legal resources with people who need them most in the spaces that they are used to going to seek for help. In Buncombe County, we know that both your faith and legal communities are especially strong, and we're delighted to partner with faith leaders and legal leaders in the Buncombe County community to host this webinar. We'll talk a little bit more over the course of this webinar about what the driver's license restoration program is, what type of relief has been offered in Buncombe County. And there will also be a space for some question and answer. So you do have a Q&A pane as part of the Zoom functionality here. If there are questions that come up over the course of this webinar, you're welcome to submit those questions as they come up, and we'll save time to get to them at the end. So please do use that functionality. Before we get started with our substantive presentation, I would like to share a special word of welcome from our Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court, Chief Justice Paul Newby.
Hello, my name is Paul Newby. I'm the Chief Justice of the state of North Carolina. Thank you for participating in this event, sponsored by the Faith and Justice Alliance, which is part of my commission on equal access to justice. In 1868, a convention was held to revise our state constitution. 20% of the delegates were freed African Americans. The delegates adopted a preamble to our constitution, clearly stating the source of our rights. Our state constitution today bears that preamble, and it says this: "We, the people of the state of North Carolina, grateful to Almighty God, the sovereign ruler of nations, for the preservation of the American Union and the existence of our civil, political, and religious liberties, and acknowledging our dependence upon Him, upon God, for the continuation of those blessings to us and to our posterity." The Constitution continues this theme in Article 1, Section 1, where we quote the familiar language from our Declaration of Independence. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal and endowed by our Creator, endowed by God with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness." We added to this statement of God-given rights that everyone is entitled to the fruits of their own labors, recognizing the dignity of work. I personally believe God has a specific purpose for each life. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, which includes the private ownership of property. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., these are a promissory note to be cashed by each person. To protect these rights, our state constitution guarantees the courts shall be open and justice shall be administered without favor, denial, or delay. Equal justice for all. A barrier to equal justice is a lack of information available to everyone to help folks navigate the judicial system. As the Equal Access to Justice Commission considered this challenge, we ask ourselves, where do people go in times of challenges? Many of us go to our faith communities. The Faith and Justice Alliance was formed in recognition of this fact. Our goal is to equip you with access to resources so that you can properly shepherd your flock. We hope you find this presentation helpful. That's our goal. Please let us know if this is beneficial and how we can better partner with you to achieve our constitutional mandate of equal justice for all. Thank you for all you do. May God bless you. May God bless our great state.
We want to thank Chief Justice Newby for his words of welcome and for his continued support of the Faith and Justice Alliance and the work that we are partnering with communities across the state to pursue. To echo his words there, we do hope this presentation is helpful to you today. Just to note who the you is there, we have folks on this call from Buncombe County, from both the community more broadly, but also especially from a number of faith traditions and houses of worship. We hope that this presentation can empower people from those congregations with information that they can then take back to their places of worship and share with those around them, to those who might find the information helpful. So to provide some of that information today, I'd like to turn it over to members of our North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center, which is also a program of the Equal Access to Justice Commission, as well as Pisgah Legal Services. So I believe first I'll be turning it over to Lee LeClaire.
Thank you so much, Jared. Hi, welcome. And we're so excited to be able to speak with you today about this really important issue. My name is Lee LeClaire. As Jared said, I work for the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center, which is a program of the Equal Access to Justice Commission. And I work on our driver's license restoration project along with Megan Marty, who you will hear from shortly. So Megan and I are going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the common issues around license suspensions and license restoration. And then we will also hear from Ed Treat from Pisgah Legal Services, who we're really excited to work with. So Jared, do you want to play the video and then we'll get started on the substance of presentation?
My family's huge and we're very family oriented. Myself, I'm just an average girl. In my life, I've been through a lot. I found out I was diabetic. I've got my license suspended, jail again. Like, it was just a lot. We were driving. It was like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. My sugar got really low. I started shaking. He sped out. He came up behind us, pulled over. I told him what happened. I was arrested, and now I have to pay $3,000 in fines for Virginia. $3,000, that's a lot of money. Because I couldn't afford to pay my fines, my license was suspended, and I ended up in jail in 2 different states. My first phone call from jail was to my mom. It was heartbreaking. Like, she answered and like, "What's wrong? Where you at? What is going on?" And I'm like, "I'm in jail, about to die. Like, I'm gonna die in here. They're not giving me medicine." It was like the worst experience. After like 2 days, I finally was able to call her. And yeah, it was hard. Very hard.
I got a call from Desiree's mother that Desiree was in jail. I called Desiree and she sounded probably the worst I had ever heard. She told me that she had been jailed and that she had been without insulin, and that they weren't really believing her that she had diabetes. And for a lot of our patients who don't have consistent lives, diabetes is in many ways a death sentence. I called her public defender, which she gave me the information for, and told him that yes, in fact, she does have diabetes and that she was not in a good situation.
If doctors had advocated for me, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys.
A lot of what I think about is how things like transportation affect health. When it comes to transportation, it can actually be a tremendous barrier to people being able to access care to medical systems.
I can't make it to half my doctor's appointments, so I'm scrambling, trying to find different doctors so that's closer.
So one of the things that happened as a result of Desiree going to jail was that she lost her endocrinologist. Doctors' offices don't like it when you don't call and don't show up. But in jail, you have a very limited number of phone calls, and so your phone calls aren't necessarily going to be to the endocrinologist to tell them that you can't show up. We perpetuate the system of inequity by basically saying to people who it's already difficult for them to get to the doctor's office, sorry, you can't have a doctor anymore.
Yeah, it creates a huge problem, and it just keeps you in this ongoing cycle of paying bills, license suspended, going to jail, coming out, extra money is being spent on bail. It's just a repeated cycle, so it's like you're never gonna get out of this cycle. If I could get on a reasonable payment plan, I will be able to pay it off, get my license back, and go back to living a normal life.
I wish that we had a system that better had a place for her, where she wasn't constantly bouncing around between the criminal justice system and the doctor's office and poverty, because she has a tremendous amount to give that we are losing in the society because of what we do to people like her.
One thing that brightens a typical day for me is my daughter. She's so understanding, she's like, oh, it's okay. We can do this. Oh, we don't have to do that. If you don't have any money, it's okay. So, my daughter. I'm hopeful for one day I'll be able to pay these fines off and be able to get a license again, live a normal life.
We have to look ourselves in the eye and ask ourselves what kind of country we want to live in. Do we want to be in a place where we jail people for minor traffic violations that effectively destroy their lives? Or do we want to be in a place where we help people figure out how to live better lives, get access to education, learn how to build wealth, and learn how to create better communities?
Thank you, Jared. So we wanted to start with that video before we really get into the PowerPoint, because it highlights just how impactful this issue of license suspension and license restoration really is. And in North Carolina, like in many other states, you have to drive to be able to get through the day, to be able to get to work, to take care of your family, your kids, to get to the doctor. And so the issue of license restoration is such an important one, and one that we really want faith leaders to be aware of, or to know that there is help out there if a member of your community or your congregation comes to you and says, I've got this issue, I need help, I don't know where to go. We're going to talk through, next slide, please. And we're going to talk about the license suspension crisis and its impact, and how license restoration is really an issue of economic and racial justice. We're also going to talk about the driver's license restoration project, how a person can access help, and where that help is available. And then we're going to go through some just common tips for navigating traffic court, especially for a person who is doing it pro se, meaning they don't have access to an attorney when they go into traffic court. While we go through the presentation, the chat feature has been disabled, but you can ask questions using the Q&A feature, as Jared mentioned. And I just want to encourage you to ask general questions about the license restoration issues, and not one that might be confidential in nature, because we will, by the time you leave here, you will have some specific places to go for help with those specific issues. Next slide, please. Okay, so North Carolina is one of 34 states that suspend or refuse to renew a person's driver's license because they couldn't afford to pay or didn't pay their court costs and fines on a traffic ticket. So the DMV must revoke a person's driver's license if they fail to appear on a traffic ticket in court, or they fail to pay a fine, penalty, or court costs that were ordered by the court when they went into court to take care of that traffic ticket. So this happens even if it's the person's first ticket that they've ever gotten, or the first time that they couldn't afford to pay off those court costs and fines. Next slide. And the impact of this is devastating and far-reaching. As of 2018, when we started this project, there were over 1.2 million people in North Carolina who had a license suspension, either for failing to appear in court or failing to pay court costs and fines, or both. So this constitutes about 15% of all adult drivers in the state. So 15% of all drivers don't have access to a valid license for one of these reasons. Next slide. And prior to the mass relief effort that the district attorney undertook in Buncombe County, which we will talk about in more detail, there were 1,648 drivers that we estimate in Buncombe County who were suspended for unpaid court costs and fines. Next slide. According to data from the AOC, when traffic court debt isn't paid within a year, it's not likely to ever be paid. And the average length of a license suspension for a failure to pay is over 8.5 years. So this policy of suspending a driver's license for unpaid fines and fees is a strategy of collecting debt by the state. And if a person can't afford to pay, this becomes it just doesn't make sense, because if you can't afford to pay and you go on to lose your job, or you're not able to find a higher paying job, it can really put a person in this cycle of owing money, not being able to pay, not being able to drive, and then getting further into debt. Next slide. One of the reasons for this that I just want to quickly mention is that the amount of fines and fees that a person owes in traffic court and in district court generally has significantly increased. In 1995, the General Court of Justice fee, which is kind of the baseline fee that anyone who gets a traffic ticket or has to appear in district court is going to be charged, was $41, and today it's $147.50. So we're talking about a 260% increase. And if the court fines and fees had only been increased to take into account inflation, then that General Court of Justice fee would be closer to $71. You can see on your screen some of the different other costs and fees that are added on to that $147.50. If a person fails to appear in court, they'll be charged another $200. If a person fails to comply, meaning they are not able to pay off that initial court costs and fee in the time that the judge is given, they'll actually be charged another $50 on top of that. And then you can see on the right of your screen, there are some additional fees that are specific to traffic offenses. If you accept a plea to improper equipment, you are going to pay another $50 automatically on top of that $147.50 that you already owe. Next slide. And as I mentioned, the consequences of having a driver's license suspension are really devastating for families and communities. And that includes a loss of employment, high transportation costs and commute times, less access to medical services, and then when inevitably a person continues to drive, criminal justice involvement. So if a person gets a ticket, let's say for speeding or for having a tail light out, then they're going to owe fines and fees on that particular ticket. If they can't afford to pay those and they continue to drive to get to work or to take care of their family, the next time they get pulled over, they can be charged with driving while license revoked, which is a criminal offense and carries with it the possibility of jail time. So we're really talking about the criminalization of poverty. And then the circle will continue. Now you owe money on the driving while license revoked charge. And if you continue to drive to try to make that money, you can be pulled over again, leading to additional fines and fees. So it's a really devastating cycle. Next slide. And of course, there are catastrophic racial disparities resulting in households of color being disproportionately exposed to and severely impacted by traffic debt. African-American and Black drivers in particular bear the heaviest burden of our current license suspension policy around unpaid fines and fees. Next slide. Black or African-American drivers are twice as likely as white non-Hispanic drivers to be pulled over. And statewide, Black or African-American drivers have active suspensions for unpaid costs and fines at a rate 4 times higher than white non-Hispanic drivers. And there are counties where that rate is higher, including in Buncombe County, where the rate is 5 times higher for having that and a suspension, particularly for unpaid court costs and fines. Next slide. So this is such an important issue to address, and I'm really excited to be able to share with you some of the work that we're doing with incredible partners in Buncombe County, including Pisgah Legal Services and the District Attorney's Office. So let me tell you a little bit now about some of the ways that a person can get help for these types of suspensions. One is through legal clinics and seeking individual representation. And Ed Treat in just a few minutes is going to tell you a little bit about our first partnership clinic that will be held this spring. But at these clinics, clients are screened primarily for suspensions for unpaid fines and fees and suspensions for failures to appear. And if a person has a failure to appear suspension, the easiest and most beneficial way that that suspension can be taken care of is if we can ask the district attorney to dismiss the traffic charges that were that the person failed to appear on. And so as part of a clinic or when you're seeking individual representation, getting the district attorney to dismiss that charge will then result in no more failure to appear suspension and then hopefully the ability to get a person's license back if that's the only thing that is holding that person back. And then the other remedy is to motion the court to remit the fine or cost. And this can be done based on a showing of inability to pay. So part of that statute that requires the DMV to revoke a person's driver's license if they can't afford to pay says that if a person shows the court that they weren't able to pay, but it wasn't a willful violation of the court's order, it was because they just simply could not afford those court costs and fines and were doing the best they can to pay them, then the court is to remit that fine or cost, and that suspension essentially goes away when that cost is or fine is remitted. And so the legal clinic that we'll tell you more about shortly, part of that will be a component of filling out affidavits of inability to pay with clients and asking the court to remit or forgive those fines and fees. Next slide. And then Buncombe County is one of the counties in North Carolina that has participated in what we call mass relief debt remittance. And with mass relief debt remittance, we actually ask the district attorney to remit fines and to motion the court to remit or forgive fines and fees that are leading to a long-term license suspension for someone. So we worked with District Attorney Todd Williams and a incredibly wonderful and dedicated ADA who did a lot of the legwork as well. And the District Attorney Williams identified cases that were 2 years old or older, where the underlying offense was, a low-level traffic offense, and that was causing a person to be in suspension status because they hadn't paid off their court costs and fines. District Attorney Williams, it was actually the one to motion the court to remit those fines and fees, and the court remitted fines and fees on hundreds of cases. And so this has been a really important partnership and a really efficient way for people to get relief and to be able to get their driver's license back. And I will also just say that that we look forward to really doing more work around this issue and being able to help more people. But this is relief that you or your congregation or your community member may have already received that we want you to know about and to know how to get more information on. So next slide, Jared. Okay, so how do you get more information? We have built a website. It's called ncfairchance.org. And when you go to ncfairchance.org, or if you're doing this with a member of your community or your congregation, you can direct them to go to ncfairchance.org and search their own name to see if they've had fines and fees already remitted in Buncombe County or one of the other counties that has participated in this program. So that person would click on restore your driver's license, put in their name and date of birth, and they'll be able to see if they've had any fines and fees already remitted for a case that was causing a license suspension. And the other really important thing that I would encourage you to share with your community is whether the person has received relief or not, they can request an advice letter, and we will order their DMV record. We will go through their DMV record and figure out exactly what suspensions are impacting their ability to get their driver's license, and send a tailored advice letter written by a pro bono attorney and of course checked by us for accuracy, and we'll send that out to the person, and that can be sort of like a map of what are the next steps to take to get a person's license back. So whether or not fines and fees have been remitted, you can still request that advice letter, and we can help give you some more information on not just your suspension, but how to go about resolving those suspensions. Next slide. So again, go to ncfairchance.org, find out if you've had fines and fees remitted, order a detailed advice letter and a free copy of your DMV record. That is really the first step in getting extra assistance. And I'm just going to briefly turn it over to Ed Treat now for the next slide. And he's going to talk a little bit about a really exciting partnership that we have coming up and what you can expect to get more information about soon.
Thanks, Lee, and thanks to everybody for being here. I really appreciate everybody taking some time out of their day. So as Lee mentioned, we are looking to run a pro bono staffed advice letter clinic early next year. This is going to be staffed by trained volunteer attorneys from the Pisgah Legal Network. Certainly, we're going to be publicizing that. You're going to see more about that. Just to reiterate a little bit of what Lee said, this offers an opportunity for clients to get a free copy of their DMV record. You cannot get an official copy of your record for free from DMV. And then the trained volunteers will be interpreting that record basically into plain English for the clients and explaining to them what steps exactly they need to take in order to start restoring their license. If you've ever looked at a DMV record, it's not written in anything like plain English, and does not in any way tell you what you need to do to get your license back. We're also hoping that, as we build our capacity, we're going to gradually be able to take more steps to assist clients at the clinic with their driver's license suspension issues, working with local district attorneys and judges throughout our service area to take more affirmative steps to help folks get their driver's licenses back. As everyone on this call knows, we're talking primarily about Buncombe County today, but Pisgah Legal serves 11 counties. It's a very diverse, very large area. And unfortunately, it's very common for folks who are residents of one county to have suspensions all over the state, even all over the country. We have limited capacity and limited resources, of course, but we're hoping to gradually expand so that we can do this sort of work beyond Buncombe County, hopefully to someday partner with district attorneys and judges beyond Buncombe County to expand this sort of relief. So there will be more information about that coming soon. In the meantime, you can go to pisgahlegal.org to learn more about what we do. And I should also note, in addition to driver's license restoration, I also do expunction work for Pisgah Legal clients, and that also covers a full 11 counties of West North Carolina. So go to pisgahlegal.org to learn more about that. And thank you again for being here. Look forward to working with all of you.
Thanks so much, Ed. And now I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful colleague, Megan Marty, who's going to talk a little bit about some information to know if you're heading into traffic court. And after that, we will answer. I see that there's some questions in the chat, and we will answer those questions at the end. So, Megan.
Thanks, Lee. Hi, everybody. I am Megan Marty. I work with Lee at the Pro Bono Resource Center. And as Lee kind of mentioned and alluded to, two of the most common suspensions we see are both failures to pay, but also failures to appear. And anecdotally, we've kind of heard that people don't go to court because it's intimidating. They're not quite sure what's going to happen. They don't know what to do. And so they just don't go. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what happens when you go to court. This is generalized information. It is certainly not legal advice, but I just want to kind of give you an overview of what a day would look like that you're going to court. So before you go, there are some things that you can take care of that'll make your day a lot less stressful. The first thing is to think about how you're going to get to the courthouse. If you're going to drive, where's the parking? Is it a lot? Is it on the street? Is it free? Do you need to pay? How far away from the courthouse is it? You also, if you're going to take public transportation, what bus line goes there? What's the bus schedule? It's so much better to figure this out a couple of days ahead of your court date instead of doing it, at 8:30 when you're supposed to be in court by 9. It's going to start your day off a whole lot better. The second thing to remember about court is that it takes a long time. You might have a 9 a.m. court date, but everybody has a 9 a.m. court date for that traffic ticket. So it's not going to be in and out. You're going to want to prepare to sit there and wait. So plan to take the day off work if you can, at least several hours if you can't get the whole day. And you're also going to want to arrange for childcare if at all possible. It's kind of courthouse by courthouse, if children are allowed in the courtrooms, and even if they are, they have to sit still and silently for a long time. I have a 6 and 8-year-old, and I would not want to be in charge of keeping them quiet in a courtroom for that long. So, if at all possible, try not to bring your kids with you. And then the last thing to think about before you go is what you're going to wear, right? And so we tend to tell people to dress like they're going for a job interview. So for men, nicer pants, a button-down shirt. For women, pants, skirt, blouse, button-down shirt, just something that you look like you want to get a job. Next slide, Jared. So when you get to court, if you do not have an attorney, you will need to talk to the assistant district attorney or the ADA. If you do have an attorney, the ADA cannot talk to you, so you'll have to wait till your attorney shows up. But if you're by yourself, one thing you'll have to do is talk to the ADA. And what she's going to do in that conversation is ultimately make you an offer for a plea. So either to the charge that you got on your ticket or to some other charge. Next slide. So while you're talking to the ADA, I like to tell people to always remain polite and kind and respectful, and then to be concise and to get to the point as quickly as you can. So if she asks you questions, try and answer them kind of as succinctly and quickly as you can. She has to talk to every single person in that courtroom, so time is not on her side and you want to be on her good side. But also don't sell yourself short. So if you have done work, like if you have multiple cases that are suspending your license and you've already handled some of them, tell the ADA that. Tell them that you've paid off some fines, that you've resolved other cases. If you've taken driving school, tell her that you've taken driving school. You want to portray yourself in the best light as possible. Another really good thing to do is if you have other cases in that same county, even if they're not scheduled for court the day that you were in court, you want to ask the ADA if you can address all of them that day that you were in court. So either you have old cases that you missed court on, or you got a couple of tickets kind of back to back, but they're not scheduled on the same day. You can tell the ADA, look, I have these other cases. Can we do this all in one thing today? And that helps kind of everybody. Like I said, she's pressed for time. She would love to not see you again on a different court date. So it's best if you have a list of those cases, but if you don't have a list of those cases, she can always look them up. But that's a really good way to kind of only go to court once instead of having to go back and back, multiple times. Next slide. So the last thing that I want people to know is that you have another resource, and that's to ask for a continuance. So if the DA makes you an offer and you feel unsure about it, or you have questions and you're not quite ready to do it, you can ask for a continuance. And that means you're going to get another court date, usually about a month in the future. I'm going to go a little into the weeds here, and I don't expect anyone to remember this, but it's just kind of an example of when asking for a continuance might be a good idea. So there are some traffic charges, if you plead guilty to or are found guilty of, that the DMV is going to automatically suspend your driver's license. For example, if you speed a certain amount over the speed limit, the DA can suspend or automatically suspend your license, not the DA, the DMV can automatically suspend your license for a certain period of time. Or if you are driving on a suspended license and you plead guilty to a moving violation, and there are multiple charges that are considered moving violations, and it's not always apparent, it's not entirely logical what counts as a moving violation and what does not. The DMV can suspend your license for a year automatically. So you want to be sure that whatever charge you are agreeing to plea to doesn't have DMV consequences. So you can ask the DA, but if she can't answer your question, she doesn't have time, you can always ask for continuance to get those questions answered before you plead, just so you're not surprised by what happens on the DMV side after you have a guilty plea in the court system. Next slide. So after you talk to the DA, if the DA has not dismissed your charge and you have not asked for a continuance, you're going to go in front of the judge. And one of the main things the judge is going to do in a traffic ticket is assess a fine and assess court costs. And the judge has it in his power not to do those things. He can not assess a fine and he can waive the court costs. But the way he does that is based on you saying, I can't pay that. So if you think that you're not going to be able to pay a ticket, please tell the judge then before the whole time is over. And it can feel a little bit awkward, right? Because you're going to be standing up there in front of the judge. There are going to be people behind you in the courtroom who, could be listening. They're not listening. They're on their phone, but they could be listening. And the judge is going to ask you questions about your money. He's going to ask, what money you have in income every month. And he might ask you about some bills you pay, and that can feel awkward. But if you don't say anything and then you get a ticket you can't pay, when you don't pay it, it's going to suspend your license. And then that's going to cause a snowball effect. And it's probably going to be more expensive in the long run because there could be more tickets. There's going to be late fees. So it's much better to have the awkward conversation with the judge at the time of the guilty plea than to try and clean it up on the end, on like the back end. Next slide. So if you do have an old traffic fine though, that you can't afford to pay and that you couldn't afford to pay then, and you still cannot afford to pay now, there is something you can do. You can file something called an AOC CR 415. And that is a form that a judge will look at and can waive old fines and court costs. It has the same information that the judge would be asking you in court. So it asks you about your income, it asks you about some expenses, and then the judge makes a determination about your ability to pay. It is a kind of new form. And so many courthouses don't have standard procedures yet about how they want it filed or what really to do with it. So it might take a little bit of persistence to get the form filed, but it is a court sanctioned form. It came from them. You are supposed to file it. I always tell people to call the clerk of court for the county that you need to file it for and just say, look, I'm trying to file this AOC CR 415 to get some old costs waived. What do I need to do? And they should be able to give you some instructions. It also needs to be sent to the district attorney's office. I know in Buncombe County, the DA's office is in the same building as the courthouse. So when you go to file it, you can also just drop a copy with the DA. So that at least is like a one-stop shop on that front. This form will be a part of our guide and file electronic system, which is an online system that will help you fill out the form, but it is not yet available, but that assistance is coming in the future. So those are all the tips I have about going to court. I think we're going to open it up and look at some of the questions and answers now. Jared or Lee?
Yeah, thank you so much, Megan. So there are quite a few questions in the chat that are related to what do I do? Do I qualify if my particular charge isn't in Buncombe County? And I'd like to say a few things about that. One is that you can order a copy of your DMV record and an advice letter through ncfairchance.org, no matter where your ticket is located. And I think it's a really good idea to do that. Unless you are absolutely 100% sure that you only have this one failure to appear or this one failure to pay, go ahead and order a copy of your advice letter. The other thing I want to mention is that we have seen a lot of legal service providers take up this issue in the last few years. And so there are providers across the state who may be able to help you, including Legal Aid of North Carolina, Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. There's some jurisdictions that have their own licensed restoration sort of specialist that works just within their county. And then there's also, I've seen a couple people who have got an issue in Eastern North Carolina, and the Blanchard Community Law Clinic through Campbell Law School also works on license restoration issues in some of those counties. So order your advice letter so you know for sure what you have to take care of. And then we will also make available, I'll work with Jared to make available what all the different providers, what their sort of qualifications are, and then make that available to you all after this presentation. Another question that has come up is the restoration program applicable for people who lost their license to DUI? And unfortunately with DWIs, there can be a lot of different types of suspensions that are the result of having a DWI conviction. So again, we'll be able to better direct you once we have a copy of your DMV record and we can see exactly what that suspension is for. Another person asks, what is the expected timeline for receiving the advice letter after it's been requested? And Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, but 3 to 4 months from the time a person orders their record to the time that it's sent out and we have a copy of their DMV record. Another person asked if the PowerPoint will be made available to attendees. Yes, we can provide the PowerPoint, and this is actually, this is recorded, and so we can make the whole presentation available. That is all of the questions I'm seeing. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, I'm not seeing it, not seeing any others. Just to note about the receiving the advice letter and why it takes 3 to 4 months. It takes us quite a bit of time to receive the DMV record once we order it. And then we go through and we annotate it. We coordinate with volunteers to draft the letter. And then we look at all of the letters and make sure that, that you are getting all the information that you need to get from us before we send it out. And so the time it takes can fluctuate based on how many people we have that have requested an advice letter, but we work really hard to get it out to you as quickly as possible. And one person asks if the advice letter costs anything, and it doesn't. It is a free service that we provide to you.
And we also send the copy of the DMV record that we get to you with the advice letter. So you'll get a copy of your DMV record for free as well.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Jared, can we turn it over to you?
Absolutely. Once again, we want to thank our presenters today, Ed, Lee, and Megan, for providing some really important information about efforts that have been conducted in Buncombe County and relief that may be available for you or members of your faith communities. So if you could take one thing away from this presentation, make it ncfairchance.org. That is the website that you can go as folks have talked about it, accessing an advice letter. That's where you need to go, ncfairchance.org. So after this webinar concludes, for folks who have registered to attend today's session, you'll receive a follow-up email with some items included in it, including how to access a recording of this webinar in case you need some of this information moving forward, a link to ncfairchance.org so you have that easily accessible. And we will also continue to communicate with you as more resources become available, including potentially information about a kickoff event that will be happening in the spring in partnership with Pisgah Legal Services in particular, that may be a resource that you are able to take advantage of. So you will hear more information about that and other resources as the weeks go by and as more of those resources become available. With that, thank you for attending today's webinar. Thank you from the Faith and Justice Alliance and Pisgah Legal Services. We are delighted to be able to work with your community in this way and hopefully provide information and legal resources that are helpful to you and your faith communities. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. There are multiple folks on this call that we are in close contact with. And we look forward to continue to working together on this and other legal issues for folks. And with that, we are adjourned for today. Thank you for attending, and you'll hear from us shortly. Take care.